Hey, welcome to Wisdify. This is Excel for accounting and finance professionals. We're going to have 2 volumes here. This is the first volume, and in this volume we're going to go through the basics on your way to becoming an Excel ninja. Go through the standard things like workbook overviews, keyboard shortcuts, formatting things, and how to just be better with the basics of Excel. And then from there we're going to get into formulas and start to dig a little deeper. We do have a full course on our website, wisdify.com, where you can take the full course for free. So make sure you check that out as well. So with that, let's dive right in.
Let me first introduce you to how this workbook is going to be set up. So this workbook is basically one giant game. And as we get started, everyone is going to start out as a prickly elephant. Now, hopefully by the very end, you become a rainbow unicorn. So as we go throughout this entire course, you are going to be getting points. Some of them are manual points, where you manually have to put them in, but most of them are automatic. So as you are filling in formulas, you'll automatically get points. Now, hopefully by the end, we get enough points where we all become a rainbow unicorn. Now, don't cheat along the way. Don't be a cheater pants and be like, ooh, I'm going to give myself 50 extra points. That way I can become a rainbow unicorn. Don't do it. Now, also in this workbook, you will see these surprise buttons, and this is just if you get bored with me and you're like, oh man, I can't listen to Nate anymore. Click the surprise button and you'll get a nice little joke to hopefully lift your spirits. Right below the surprise button is the hot tip button. When you click on that, it gives you a cool little tip or trick in Excel. Now, I will not be clicking on these hot tip buttons throughout, so that's kind of up to you if, once again, you're like, all right, I can't take this guy anymore. Let me click on this hot tip and see what's going on. Well, you can definitely do that. Now, another part of the workbook is the whole workbook has both the practice and the solution. So I'm just going to go to an example. So for example, here we have the absolute cell references page, and you can see that that's where we are right here. And then the next page over is the solution. So just make sure that when you are working on the worksheet that you are not on the solution, but on the blank worksheet. And if you ever get lost and you just aren't quite understanding the formula or the video isn't quite clear, you can always go to the solution and see exactly how I did that formula. Now with that, let's go ahead and jump into the workbook, and we are going to get started with formatting. Now, why are we talking about formatting? You might be thinking, Nate, let's jump into the formulas. Let's jump into VLOOKUP and these crazy things. Well, before we do that, we need to learn some things, and formatting is the very, very first thing. Now, I want you to think, why do you think formatting is so important in Excel? Well, there are a couple different reasons. First of all, when a spreadsheet is not formatted properly, it makes it very, very difficult to read that spreadsheet. It makes it difficult to understand what the numbers are saying, what numbers mean what section is where, and so on. So it makes it very difficult to read a spreadsheet when it's ugly and unformatted. Now, a second reason why formatting is so important is because it reduces errors. If you properly format your spreadsheet and you follow the conventions that I lay out here, it will reduce errors significantly in your workbook. And a third reason why we want beautiful, nicely organized spreadsheets is because we like pretty things. We don't like ugly spreadsheets. Ugly spreadsheets are terrible. Throw them out the window. If you ever get an ugly spreadsheet, send it back to that person and say, make this look pretty. And if you happen to make an ugly spreadsheet, make sure you make it look pretty. Don't ever make an ugly spreadsheet. People will not like it. No one wants to be inside an ugly spreadsheet. So let me just go through a couple of conventions with you. This is not everything, but let me just go through a couple conventions with you that you must follow. Everything else is sort of personal preference, but there's a few things that you must do. Now, the very first thing we teach is the font coloring. So let me give you the font coloring lay of the land. Anything that is an input or an assumption or whatever you want to call it, but anything that's an input or an assumption, we are going to color that font blue. All right, so anything that is an assumption, we are going to color that cell blue. Now, everything else is going to be colored black. That right there is standard convention. No matter where you go, which company you're at, that is a standard convention among Excel users. that anything that is colored blue, when the font color is blue, that means that is an input that you can change and you can mess with it. It's an assumption. And anything that is black should not be touched. It might be a formula or it might be a data dump, whatever, but anything that is colored black, do not touch. This will send a very clear signal to the people who are using your spreadsheet. Now, some people do like to color links to other files red. This is more of a personal preference. I don't really follow this formatting rule too much, but 100% I follow these two colors without exception. Now, speaking of inputs, we don't ever want to hard code a number into a formula. And what I mean by that, let's say down here, I want to calculate how many hours I worked during the year. So I put equals 40 hours a week times, we'll say 48 weeks. So I had, let's say, 48 weeks of vacation, and hit enter. So let's say I worked 1,900 hours over the last year, whatever. Well, notice how I manually inputted these numbers in that formula. We don't ever want to do that, and here's why. When you manually input a number into a formula, it makes it extremely difficult for someone to audit the spreadsheet. So if you hand your spreadsheet off to Susie and you say, hey Susie, here's the analysis you wanted, and all she sees is a bunch of calculations and she doesn't see any of your assumptions, she's going to ask, okay, well, Billy, what were you assuming was the interest rate? What were you assuming were the number of days? What were you assuming is the revenue growth? What were you assuming is the expenses? They're going to ask about all of your assumptions. And so we always, when we are building out a spreadsheet, we put all of our assumptions right up top, at the very top, and then we color all of those blue. From there, we then put all the calculations down below it. So a better way to have done this would have been hours per week and say 40, and weeks per year and done 48. And I could have put total hours. And then I would have colored these blue because these are hard inputs. I'll just color these some type of blue. And I'll put a bottom border on this. And then I would do equals the 40 hours times the 48 weeks to get 1,900. So that is what you must do. Now, let me quickly show you an example of some spreadsheets that we've built out for clients of how this actually looks and feels. Now, here's a spreadsheet we developed for one of our old clients years and years ago. And this is a real estate model. I'm not going to go into what the model is doing, but this is some type of real estate model. Now, you'll notice that throughout we have assumptions. We have the project name, the project address, city, state, and so on. You'll notice that we colored all of the inputs blue. Now, to make it even more clear, we also highlighted the background. We did a fill color also blue, just to once again make it very clear that this is an input. So you'll see that everything in blue, the client could change. So if they wanted to change this amount right here, they could change this to 14 million. Or if they want to change this rate to 15%, or this to 3%, or whatever it is they want to change, everything in blue are the things they can change. And when you change anything in blue, it flows to the rest of the worksheet. Now, why it all flows to the rest of the worksheet is because all of these are referencing these input cells. So you'll never see in this entire spreadsheet any formula that says times 0.02 or whatever. Everything is based on these inputs that are colored in blue. So that's the very first thing. We want to color all inputs blue. Everything else is black, so any formulas or anything like that is black. And then we want to make sure that we don't hard code anything into any formula and make sure that our assumptions are very clearly laid out throughout. Now, another big pet peeve is when people don't format their numbers. Make sure you format your numbers. It's extremely easy to format your numbers. There's no trick to it. All you do is come up here on the Home tab and you can format your numbers to however your heart desires. Don't leave numbers unformatted, and make sure they're formatted properly. Now, I won't spend too much time on that because that's somewhat intuitive. Another thing we like to tell people is definitely use borders and fill colors wisely. definitely use fill colors. We always use fill colors to set different sections apart. So I'm going to go back to that other example that we did for the client, and you will see that every single piece is separated by a fill color. So this is the property data, and down here is the credit data and the funding data. So we use this fill color to very clearly section off each part of the spreadsheet. And then we also use borders very wisely to also help set apart our data. So I'm going to go back to our spreadsheet. So definitely use fill colors and borders. But with that, be very wise with your fill colors. Don't use ugly fill colors like yellow. That's ugly, it's an eyesore. Instead, use softer colors. And speaking of fill colors, don't get too crazy. Don't use the entire rainbow. Yes, I understand that you have the rainbow of colors right here. You can use literally any color you could possibly imagine right here. But just because you have all the colors doesn't mean you should use them. Be very wise and minimal with your fill colors. So those are some of the big things with formatting. Basically, you just want your spreadsheet to look very clean, very easy to read, and very clear on how to use it. Now, when we combine all that together, it means that when you give someone your spreadsheet, it's going to make the spreadsheet very intuitive to read and understand. And the less that you need to explain, the better. So make sure you take the time to actually make your spreadsheet look nice. Now, it might take some rearranging, it might take a little bit of time, but the effort pays off. So here's what I need from you, Susie or Billy. I need you to promise me that you are going to make beautiful spreadsheets from here on out. So I need you to promise right now. Can you say, all right, Nate, I promise I'm going to make it. Okay. I'm going to trust that you said that you promise. Now, if you do promise, go ahead and give yourself 1 point right here where it says additional points. Go ahead and just put 1 right there. Don't try to get cute with me and try to put like 4 or 5. You can't. I locked it down. So you can only do 0 or 1. So go ahead and give yourself 1 point. And with that, let's go ahead and go on to keyboard shortcuts. So we are actually going to spend quite a bit of time on keyboard shortcuts. This is not something that we are going to hit and then leave. This is something that we are going to use throughout the entire time. Now, keyboard shortcuts are essential. This is not a good to have. This is essential. In fact, let me just clear something up right off the bat. Everything we teach in this class is essential. We're not going to teach you anything that's just fluff. That's just a good to know or you might use in the future. Every single thing we teach you, you must know. So let me start out by talking to you about keyboard shortcuts. You are going to see that there are a ton of keyboard shortcuts on this page. Now we do not, let me repeat that, we do not expect you to memorize all of these keyboard shortcuts. I don't even know all of these keyboard shortcuts. If you walked up to me in the street and you're like, hey Nate, what's the keyboard shortcut for like, I don't know, like insert time? I'd be like, well, first of all, dude, you're a weirdo. Why are you asking me that? Like, say hi to me or like do something. Give me a hug. I don't know. Don't ask me keyboard shortcuts. It's weird. I wouldn't know because I don't use this keyboard shortcut at all. Now, if you ask me the keyboard shortcut for insert a row or insert a column, well, that I could tell you. So I don't expect you to memorize all of these keyboard shortcuts. These are just sort of a reference point for you. A good to know. But what I do expect you to do is to memorize and learn the keyboard shortcuts that will be most useful to you. Now, what's most useful to you will be different than what's most useful to me. Now, there will be a few that are universal. So I am going to teach you guys a few that are universal, but sort of the rest is up to you. Now, let me tell you one more thing about keyboard shortcuts. When you start using keyboard shortcuts, it will be slower than using your mouse. All right, our goal is to cut the cord on the mouse. And at first, it will be slower. I get people all the time, they're like, Nate, I started using keyboard shortcuts and it was painfully slow. And so I just gave up. Well, first of all, that's a quitter. We don't like quitters. You are not a quitter. We do not want you to quit. It will be slower. It's going to take you a couple of weeks to get used to it. But the payoff is enormous. If you can become 10 to 15% more efficient in Excel, you can save about 40 hours worth of work every single year. That's 1 week worth of work that you can save by becoming a master of these keyboard shortcuts. So I just wanted to preface with that. You need to practice. It will be slower, but you need to press on. All right, kind of getting off my soapbox here. Let's go ahead and jump into a few key keyboard shortcuts that you need to know, that everyone needs to know. The very first thing is Control S. What Control S is going to do is save your workbook. So go ahead and try that. On your keyboard, with your left pinky, hit Control, and then with your pointer finger, hit S. So Control S, or whatever's most comfortable for you. But use it in just one easy motion, Control S. That is going to save your workbook. I don't ever want to see you ever come up here to this floppy disk and hit Save. I will come through your computer and slap your wrist if you ever do that. Don't ever hit this floppy disk. In fact, in a second, we're going to get rid of the floppy disk altogether. And what's even worse, this is like what your grandma does, so this is not what you are going to do. Don't ever go to File and then Save. That's even worse, all right? That's just terrible. Don't ever do that. So Control S, that's going to save your workbook. The next keyboard shortcut that you need to know is Control C. So on your keyboard, with your left pinky, hit Control, and then with your pointer finger, your left pointer finger, hit C, Control C. What that is going to do is copy a cell. Or if I selected multiple cells, I can hit Control C and copy multiple cells. So you can practice by just doing Control C on B2. So go to B2 and hit Control C. That is going to copy that cell. Then what we can do is I can arrow over to C2, and then I can hit Control V. V as in Victor. Control V. Now when I hit Control V, that is going to paste that cell. Here's copy. I did Control C to copy, Control V to paste. The next thing is Control Z. Control Z is going to undo the last action. So right here, I copied this cell and say, oh, whoops, I didn't mean to copy that. Let me undo that last action. Well, then I'm going to hit Control Z to undo. Now, what I don't want you to do is ever come up here to the undo button. I know you have it up there, but once again, we are going to get rid of that in just a minute, but I don't ever want you to hit this undo button. So Control Z is going to undo the last action. Control Y is redo. So you can hit Control Y, and that's going to redo the last action. So let's recap. Control S, that's going to save your workbook. Control C is going to copy. Control V is going to paste. Control Z will undo, and Control Y will redo. Okay, so those are the very, very basics that you need to know. Now, don't worry, we are going to learn a lot more, but those are sort of the core keyboard shortcuts everyone needs to know. And the great thing is, those keyboard shortcuts work in Word and PowerPoint, on the internet, on your Gmail. They work everywhere. That's sort of like a universal keyboard shortcuts. The Control C, the Control V, the Control Z, Control Y, all of those are sort of universal keyboard shortcuts that work pretty much anywhere. So those are the key ones you need to know. Now, there's a couple of things that we constantly do in Excel, and I want to show you guys these keyboard shortcuts. One of them is we are constantly inserting and deleting columns and rows. Now, typically how you'd insert a column or row is you'd select on the column, you'd right click and go down to Insert. Well, we are not going to do that. Instead, we are going to use keyboard shortcuts to do this for us. So come down here to like C26. Go down to like C26. Now to select an entire column, we are going to hit Control Spacebar. So go ahead and on your keyboard hit Control Spacebar. Do it all with your left hand if possible. Now after we hit Control Spacebar, I'm going to hit Control Shift. So with my left hand, my left pinky Control, my left ring finger Shift, and then with my right hand, I'm going to do the plus equal sign. And that is going to insert a column or a row. So Control, Shift, and the plus key is going to insert a column or a row. Now to delete a column or row, all I have to do is hit Control and the minus key. And then as I do that, it deletes the row or the column. So Control Spacebar is going to select an entire column. Now go ahead and just unselect that cell. So just hit the up or down arrow and go back to cell C26. Now on your keyboard, go ahead and hit Shift Spacebar and see what that does. Well, when you hit Shift Spacebar, it selects an entire row. So Control Spacebar is going to select the entire column, and then Shift Spacebar is going to select an entire row. So then I can insert rows by doing Control Shift and the plus equals key, and I can insert columns, or I can hit Control minus to delete columns. So from here on out, that is how we are going to insert and delete columns and rows, is by using the Control or Shift Spacebar plus Control Shift plus or Control minus. Alright, so with those keyboard shortcuts, you are well on your way to becoming a keyboard shortcut master. Those are simple shortcuts, but even those few simple shortcuts will save you an immense amount of time. Now, when you are ready, we are going to kick your keyboard shortcuts into high gear. So after you've mastered those keyboard shortcuts, I then want you to master another set of keyboard shortcuts. Now, we will be very limited using the Control and the Shift key. The Control, the Shift, and the different numbers and letters, that will only take us so far, but at some point we are going to hit a roadblock with our keyboard shortcuts. The key is using the Alt key. So what I want you to do is on your keyboard, hit the Alt key. Go ahead and hit the Alt key on your keyboard. Now when you did it, you probably noticed these letters pop up at the top of your screen, and numbers also. Now usually when people would do that, they're like, oh crap, I just did something wrong in Excel, I just broke it, hit the escape key, exit out of Excel, and cry because I probably broke Excel. What people don't realize is they are unlocking some of the most powerful keyboard shortcuts in Excel. They just open up an entire world. It's like the Little Mermaid. It's a whole new world. Wait, no, that's not Little Mermaid. Aladdin, whatever it is. It's like a whole new world right here with the Alt keyboard shortcut. Okay, so you'll notice that there is a letter beneath each of the items on your ribbon. H for home, N for insert. I don't know why they didn't do I. That would have made more sense, whatever. P for page layout, M for formulas, and so on. So go ahead and on your keyboard, I want you to type in W. Just type in the W. And that's going to open up the View tab. So type in W. And you'll notice that when you type in W, it opens up the View tab. And now Excel throws up a bunch of other letters at you. Well, there's one thing I don't like in Excel, and that's grid lines. I think grid lines are ugly. I think they make the spreadsheet look cluttered. And so I always get rid of grid lines. But let's say you're like, oh, but Nate, I want grid lines. They make me feel happy inside. Well, look, here's grid lines right here. Instead of checking this box, notice how there's a VG under grid lines. So on your keyboard, just type in VG, and now your spreadsheet has grid lines. So to get rid of grid lines, the keyboard shortcut is Alt-W-VG. Now, as you can imagine, I use that keyboard shortcut all the time. As soon as I open up a blank workbook, I immediately do Alt-W-VG, get rid of grid lines. And then I immediately make this column a size 1. Column A, I always make this size 1. And then I make row 1 size 7. So that's the very first thing I do anytime I open up a blank workbook is I just get it ready for how I like things to be formatted. So using the Alt key will open up every single thing on the ribbon. So if I type in Alt and then H, you'll notice that it opens up the Home tab. And then you see all the different items on the home screen. And also using the Alt key, we can access other keyboard shortcuts. For instance, if I want to change the row height, well, the row height is not up here on the screen. Normally to change row height, I have to come down here, right click, go down to row height. But I change the row height all the time. So I memorize what the row height keyboard shortcut is. It's Alt-O-R-E. Now, you wouldn't figure that out by coming up here and hitting the Alt key and trying to figure it out, but you can Google that and say, hey, what's the keyboard shortcut for changing the sheet name or whatever? And the key is going to be the Alt key. Most of them are going to be unlocked using the Alt key. So I want you to practice real quick. I want you to come down here to B4. Go to cell B4. And I want you to pause this video. Go ahead and pause the video. Well, not yet. Let me give you the instructions first and then pause the video. What I want you to do is I want you to figure out the keyboard shortcut using the Alt key to have no fill color on cell B4. So go ahead and figure that out. Hit the pause button. Don't cheat here. Hit the pause button and then come back. Okay, so I hope you actually hit the pause button. I hope you figured it out. Now the keyboard shortcut is going to be Alt. I'm going to type H for home. And then notice that the fill color is H. So I'm going to type in H again. And notice down here, no fill is N. So I just type in N. So the keyboard shortcut for no fill color is Alt H H N. That's it. Pretty easy, right? So once you've mastered those very first keyboard shortcuts I mentioned to you, after that, definitely go on to the Alt key. You don't need to memorize every single thing on this ribbon, otherwise you'll go crazy. But what I do want you to memorize are the keyboard shortcuts that you use all the time. For instance, if you're constantly changing the font size or making, some type of coloring or some type of font color, whatever, make sure you learn those keyboard shortcuts using the Alt key. Okay, now I need another commitment from you. You've already promised to make a spreadsheet beautiful. I hope you did. Now the next thing I need you to do is promise me you are going to use keyboard shortcuts. I need you to promise me that. And if you can promise that you are going to use keyboard shortcuts, you can go ahead and give yourself 1 point here. So there's one other additional thing that's really cool about the Alt key. Go ahead and hit the Alt key once again on your keyboard. And you're going to notice that up here on the Quick Access toolbar, that's what this is called, it's the Quick Access toolbar. You'll notice that there are numbers. There's 1, 2, and 3. There's 1 below the save, a 2 for undo, and 3 for redo. So if I wanted to save the workbook, I could hit Alt and then just type in 1 and it would save my workbook. But think about that for a second. Why is that completely pointless? Why is that useless? Well, because we already have the keyboard shortcut for save. It's Control S. And so why would we need 2 keyboard shortcuts to save our workbook? We already know the keyboard shortcut for undo. What's the keyboard shortcut? It's Control Z. And we know it for redo. It's Control Y. So we don't need these. These are somewhat repetitive. What we can do is actually get rid of those items and put the commands that will be most useful to us. So what I want you to do is, on the Quick Access toolbar, you'll see this little arrow to the side. Go ahead and click on that arrow. And I want you to go down to More Commands. You are going to get this menu that pops up. And over here on the right-hand side, these are all the default commands. And what I'm going to do is actually get rid of these. And I want you to do the same thing. So go ahead and click on Save and click on Remove. And you just hit Remove again and Remove. So we got rid of those items on the Quick Access toolbar. We don't need them because we already have keyboard shortcuts for those items. What we want to put on here instead are the 5, 6, 7, 8 most common commands that you use. So for instance, I use no borders all the time. Usually when I go in a spreadsheet, I'll kind of get rid of a bunch of borders, add borders, and so on. So I might want to put no borders. So I'm going to come up here and I'm going to go down to the Home tab. And I'm going to find where it says no borders. Let's find no borders. It's right here, no border. I'll click add. And I use bottom border all the time. So I'm going to come up here to bottom border. Let's see, where's bottom border? There we go, bottom border. Now I also use all borders. And so I might find where it says all borders, add that, and so on. So I could add more things. I might come up here to the insert tab. And I might put pivot table or pivot chart. So let me find pivot table. Let's see, where's P? There we go. Pivot chart and pivot table. So I might put those as my commands I put on my Quick Access toolbar. What you put on yours is completely up to you. You want to put the commands that you use all the time on your Quick Access toolbar. And let me show you why in just a second. But take a second, go ahead and pause the video. And I want you to go through and just figure out what commands you want on your Quick Access toolbar. Don't go crazy. Don't put like 10, 15, 20 commands. Keep it to 5 to 8 commands. And I wouldn't recommend doing much more than that. But if you want to, go ahead. But pause the video. And I want you to go ahead and put the commands on your Quick Access toolbar. Okay, so I actually hope you did that. Now, let me just show you guys why this is going to be really important. What I'm going to do is hit the OK button, and you'll notice that up here, my Quick Access toolbar changed. Well, here's what's really cool about the Quick Access toolbar, is you just created your own keyboard shortcuts. So let me show you what I mean. I'm going to select all of these cells right here. And let's say I want to put borders around all of these cells. Well, here's the all borders command right here. So on my keyboard, I can just hit Alt. And notice that the all borders is 3. So I can type in 3. And that just put all borders around my cells. Well, let's say I want to get rid of all the borders. Well, I just hit Alt. And then 1, which is no borders right here. Alt 1. And then I got rid of all the borders. If I wanted to do a bottom border, I can just hit Alt 2. If I want to get rid of it, Alt 1, and so on. So that's the power of the Quick Access toolbar plus the Alt key. You can create your own keyboard shortcuts. So make sure you take the time to actually go through to figure out which commands are going to be most useful to you. All right, so I need a commitment from you. I need one more commitment from you. I need you to promise me that you are going to take the time to actually use keyboard shortcuts. I need you to commit that you're going to use them, and even though it's going to be slow and painful at first, you are going to push through and keep learning them. You will become a ninja if you do that. People will think you are incredible. Even if you are a complete dunce at the rest of Excel, you know nothing else about Excel, but you know how to use keyboard shortcuts, people will think you're amazing, and they're just going to throw money at you. They're going to be like, here's some money, and you're going to be like, awesome, I love it. All right, so if you promise that you are going to do that, go ahead and give yourself 1 point right here. And with that, we are going to go on to the keyboard exercises. Now, we are not done with keyboard shortcuts quite yet. And why we're not is because they are super important. And there's just a couple more that we need to learn that we will use throughout this course. So what I want you to do is go ahead and go down to cell B7. Go ahead and go to cell B7. And with your left pinky, hold down the control key. And then with your right hand, go ahead and hit the down arrow once, then the right arrow, then the up arrow, and then the left arrow. So you'll notice that when you hold down the control and then use the arrows, we can quickly navigate to different parts of our data. You'll notice that when I'm in cell B7, I hit control down arrow, that it jumps down to B17 because in B18, there's a blank cell. And so this is the end of that data set. And then when I hit control right arrow, it goes to H17. That's because I is blank. And so when I hit the control and the arrows, it's going to jump to the end of different sets of data. Now, where this is extremely useful is when you are working with hundreds or thousands of rows worth of data, or you have 20, 30, 40 columns worth of data, and you need to jump to the end. Well, the worst thing you can do is scroll using the little scroll thing on your mouse, or coming over here to the scroll bar and going down that way. Or worst of all, just going like this. That's even worse. That's like what your grandma does. This is not your grandma's training. We are learning how to be efficient in Excel. Now you might be thinking, Nate, dude, stop dissing on my grandma. My grandma's pretty awesome at Excel, and that'd be pretty awesome. So go ahead and go back to cell B7. So we know that the control and the arrows is going to jump to different parts of our data. Now what I want you to do is hold down the shift key with your left hand, and then using your right hand, go ahead and hit the down arrow, down right, and you'll notice that you can select different parts of your data using the shift and the arrow keys. So control in the arrows, you can jump around different pieces of your data, and the shift in the arrows is going to help you select different parts of your data. So now what we can do is actually combine these two things together. I want you to go to cell B7, and using your left hand, hit control with your pinky, shift with your ring finger, and then hit the down arrow, and then the right arrow. So using the control and the shift key together, we can quickly select large pieces of data. That will be way better than coming over here, getting your mouse, finding the cell, clicking, and selecting that way. That took like 5 years. We don't want to do that. Instead, we are going to use control, shift, and the arrows to select different pieces of our data. So that's what we are going to do throughout the rest of this time, is use the control, the shift, and the arrows to select our data. That will save you an immense amount of time knowing this keyboard shortcut. Now, one common thing people run into when they are using the control and the arrows is they sometimes get a little too trigger happy and they're like, going down, down. All of a sudden, they end up in row 1,048,576. And like, whoa, didn't mean to go down there. And then all of a sudden, they start scrolling back up to get to the very top. Don't do that. Instead, just hit Control and the up arrow. It'll pop you right back to where you were before. Or you might go to column XFD on accident. Well, that's fine. Just hit Control, left arrow to go back to where you were before. So don't freak out if you accidentally get to the very end of the worksheet. Just use the Control and the arrows to get yourself right back to where you were before. Okay, so let's go ahead and practice using the Control and the arrows. What I want you to do is go to cell J9 to where it says Start on exercise 1. And what I want you to do is, using just the Control and the arrows, I want you to navigate this little maze right here. Now, don't use Control Shift in the arrows, just use Control in the arrows. And I just want you to get used to using Control in the arrows to navigate your data. I am getting all screwed up here. So go to cell J9 and then just use the Control and the arrows to quickly navigate this data. Go forward, backwards, and have a lot of fun. Now, if you're feeling really ambitious, go to cell U9. Now, if you're looking for something to do this weekend, you're like, man, I have no plans this weekend. Here's what you need to do. Call up all of your friends and say, you guys, come over to my house, huge party, it's going to be amazing. And then they get to your house and you have a race with them. That's all you do. You race them on this little exercise 2 and you say, all right, let's see who's the fastest with the Control and the arrows to navigate this maze. It sounds pretty amazing to me, but that's just me. So go to cell U9 and using the Control and the arrows, go ahead and navigate this little maze and see if you can't do it backwards as well and then forward again. And then just see if you can get faster and faster doing this little exercise. That's just going to help you understand how the Control and the arrows are going to work. So of all the keyboard shortcuts throughout this training, we are going to be using these the absolute most, so you will become very, very familiar with these throughout the training. Go ahead and, for completing this amazing exercise right here, you're probably like breaking a sweat right now. Go ahead and give yourself 1 extra point right here. And you should level up to a stale draft. So congratulations, you are now a stale draft. That's pretty amazing. How many people are stale drafts in this world?
This is volume 1 of our Excel for accounting and finance professionals. Click here to head to volume 2. Make sure you like this video, subscribe, and leave any comments below.